Ponyville Manor, written by and read by Clifford Wiley. Prologue. Lightning lit the dark sky, and thunder soon filled the night air with sound. The purple unicorn braced herself against the rock wall as she fought through the wind and rain on her path to Canterlot. The mountain path was steep up and down on each side, but as the pony made her way up the path, she was not aware of the sinister events happening below her in the Everfree forest. Lightning struck the ground just outside the manor's entrance. The abandoned house groaned in the wind, and memories of its past occupants stirred in its walls. Its single resident felt his moment and let out a sinister laugh only the spirits in the manor could hear. He looked at each of the walls surrounding him in the basement, each carved with a runic symbol. As lightning struck the house, it caused the symbols to burst into flames. At that moment, shadows raced from the walls of the manor and into the air, escaping their prison as its magical walls were torn down. He laughed maniacally at his success, for he had released a curse on the land which had so easily tossed him aside into exile and forgotten about him. He had now had his revenge, but it was not over yet. Equestria would pay for its actions. Chapter 1. Twilight Sparkle's hooves padded against the wet mud as she trotted down the main street of Ponyville. She had just returned from a visit with Celestia at Canterlot to report on her discoveries regarding the magic of friendship. She looked up at the gray sky. It had been raining on and off all day. Bringing her head down, she actually took in her surroundings for the first time. The houses and stores were all ransacked, and the street empty. Realizing her solitude, she stopped. In a voice that barely came out in a whisper, she said, "Hello? Any pony there?" She stood there, in silence, the fear building up inside of her. She started cautiously walking backwards. Her flank brushed something. Her recently built-up terror let itself out as a scream, but no sound came. Then she realized her mouth was covered completely by an orange hoof, and in her ear came a familiar voice, strong, but full of fear. "Twilight, we need to get out of here now, all right?" Applejack said. Twilight's heart filled with relief at her friend's presence. She turned to look at Applejack as her hoof released her. But what she saw was not what she expected. A jagged gash ran along her chin, but her eyes were deep and tired. "Applejack, what happened?" she muttered to her close friend. "It's good to see you well, Twilight, but we need to go now," Applejack said sternly. But she was cut off as Applejack pulled her into the alley aside Rarity's store. "I'm so sorry, Twilight, but this ain't no time for explainin'. We gotta get to Fluttershy's house now," she said, pushing Twilight behind some trash cans. That's when she heard it. Hoofsteps. Not normal, but oddly timed, lopsided sounding hoofsteps. She looked over to Applejack, only to see her sink to the ground. Her expression changed to something of sadness and pure terror. Applejack stood up. "Twilight, we need to leave now," and she bolted away from the hoofsteps. Twilight, with the fear again growing inside of her, bolted after Applejack. She ran back across the street and noticed something she hadn't before. Blood. It was everywhere, spread along the building's walls and in puddles around the street. She closed her eyes, not wanting to believe what she had seen, using the sound of Applejack's rapid hoofbeats to guide her. But closing her eyes didn't help. The images that lingered in her mind. And now the unfamiliar tangy smell of blood worked its way into her nose, making everything all too real and all too terrifying. Just then her hoof caught on something on the ground. She fell and slid through what she knew was blood. She stood up, opening her eyes to see what had tripped her. A body. A pony lying there, lifeless. She didn't recognize the pony, and couldn't, as Applejack's hoof pulled her away. This time she didn't close her eyes, but ignored everything but Applejack's tattered tail. They ran for what seemed like forever, going through alleys and avoiding open streets, until they finally came to Fluttershy's familiar house, far from the town. It wasn't familiar. The windows were broken and boarded up. The fence surrounding the house had been raised and covered with evil-looking thorned bushes. But the most different and most unsettling was the lack of animals Fluttershy usually had frolicking around her house. Applejack slowed and trotted up to the door and whispered. Muttering came from behind the door, and it soon swung open, revealing Fluttershy, who looked worse than Applejack, but seemed physically unharmed. "Oh, come in, quick, please." Twilight followed Applejack into the dark living room. As the door slammed behind them, everything went dark, but as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, her heart grew more and more terrified at what she saw. All around her were her friends, all injured and looking to her. They were all silent as Twilight took in what she saw. In a corner, shaking, sat Rarity, a bandage around her midsection, Applejack limping to the couch, and Fluttershy standing by the window, looking through a crack in the boards. On the other side of the room was Pinkie Pie, hunched over a bed. Her hair was flat, and she was sobbing. On the bed was the worst thing Twilight could imagine. Rainbow Dash lying there limp, bandages around her wings, and one around her head, covering her left eye. Her entire body was covered in bruises and cuts. Rainbow's head came up, and her one uncovered eye looked at Twilight with what she thought was relief. "Twilight, you're okay," she stuttered. Then her head fell back down to the pillow with a soft thump, and with that soft thump all of Twilight's world came crashing down, and the floor came up to meet it. Her eyes opened to see Fluttershy standing beside her. "Oh, you're awake, Twilight." Twilight worked her way to a sitting position and saw Applejack sitting on her other side, staring at the door, which was on the opposite side of the room now. "What happened?" she asked, as it was the only thing that could come to her mind. "To be honest, I don't think anybody understands what happened," Applejack said, her eyes remaining steady on the door. "All I know is it's no good." "It all started after you left, Twilight," Fluttershy cut in. "The first thing I noticed was all the animals started to go missing, and the sky was getting darker, and I went to go look for the animals, but I could never find them, no matter how hard I looked," she ended quietly. "Ponies started going missing one by one from town," Applejack said after a moment of silence. "Every pony got nervous. After a while the missing ponies would show up, each one ill and near to death. We tried to save them all, but the medicine we had didn't seem to help at all," Fluttershy said quietly. Then in an even quieter tone she said, "We tried, but it didn't help. They started dying one by one, and there was nothing we could do. But that's not the end of it. After they died, She was cut off by Applejack, who snapped her head away from the door. "And they all stay dead. That's it. Nothing more to say," she said sternly, and turned back to the door. Fluttershy, who looked disconcerted by what Applejack said, stared down at the ground. "Wait, what really happened?" Twilight asked, but no response came from either of the two. Then a sound that made all three jump, Rarity clearing her throat from the corner. "That's not what happened. Deny it all you want, but they didn't die, or at least not completely." As each of these words escaped Rarity's mouth, Twilight began to understand. They became violent, deranged, each one. Some escaped and injured a pony. After that we locked the rest in one of the houses, to quarantine the sickness. What happened next was worse. The one pony that had been injured soon began to show those horrid symptoms. She ended with a shudder. Twilight, trying to understand all of this information, sat back on the couch with a sigh. She looked around and tried to sort through the fear and panic in her head. But as her eyes came across Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash, her emotions spun out of control. Once she had organized her thoughts, she trotted over to the two and sat opposite Pinkie Pie, beside Rainbow Dash, who had fallen asleep. "How did this happen?" she asked Pinkie Pie quietly. Pinkie sniffled. She shook her head. Fluttershy came and rested a hoof on Pinkie's shoulder. "She should be better soon," she said, more to Pinkie Pie than to Twilight. "It happened after the sick ponies escaped from the house. They went for innocent ponies. Rainbow Dash tried to save a group of fillies, but got hurt in the process. She was so brave, but she was lucky she didn't get hurt any worse." Just then Rainbow Dash's eyes fluttered open, and with a groan she sat up. "I'm feeling better," she said with a cough. At that moment Pinkie Pie's air went from flat to its usual puffy demeanor, as she shot up with joy at her friend's recovery. "Oh, I'm so glad you're okay, Rainbow," Pinkie Pie said with glee, her happiness filling the room with an unexpected warmth that seemed to relax every pony. "Well, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have made it. Thanks, Pinkie Pie," Rainbow Dash replied. "Leave it to Pinkie Pie to liven things up," Applejack said quietly, approaching the group with Rarity. As Twilight relished in this warmth of friendship, she felt something missing. A hole, and she couldn't figure out what belonged in it. "Until?" she asked. "Where's Spike?" He asked it quietly, fearing what she might hear. "Twilight, I'm so sorry," Applejack said softly, and all of their faces filled with guilt, and Pinkie's hair deflated again. "What? He's okay, right?" Her confusion a curtain covering what she knew. Applejack said carefully, planning every word she spoke. "He was one of the first to disappear, but he never turned up again. Who knows? Maybe he's okay." But her tone betrayed her attempts to comfort Twilight. Twilight, unable to breathe at this news, unable to cope with the thought that Spike, her lifelong friend, was gone. She sank to the floor, tears welling in her eyes. She laid there and tucked her head under her hooves and sobbed.